Went off-season, Overhaul.
Here we go, Kay. Here we go. Who's batting lead off today? Who gets the honor?
We're looking at every division, right? So this division is up, and we're talking about how they've positioned themselves in free agency, who they lost, who they added, and so on. I will go first here, NFC North, South style. I'm going to go with the Bucks, I think, here, because to me, I think I might be all in on the Bucks, and I always look at things from a fantasy perspective. So let's leave the offense alone, because we know they added Deshaun Jackson, who's just an incredible deep threat, adds an entire different element to their offense, right? Leading the league in yards per catch last season. Defensively, last half of the season last year, they were fourth best in the league. They added to that, right? One of my unappreciated storylines was Chris Baker. He's now opposite Gerald McCoy. That is pretty lethal. I think they need, with all those acquisitions, like the Deshaun Jackson situation, like maybe protect Jameis, add to the offensive line. So in my head, that's what they would have to do in the draft. A guy like Forrest Lamp. Jameis Winston low-key hit fourth most of any quarterback in the league last year. So let's like protect him. Let's give him that Velveeta cheese block that I always talk about. What do you guys think?
Yeah, 100%. You know, Tampa, they're such an interesting team because they're so talented and they're so young. And you just look at the two guys that are anchoring that offense. Mike Evans and Jameis Winston, you almost think if there's just one more piece, are they going to find that one more piece in the draft that can change everything for this squad? Because we fall in love with them every year, and it seems like there's moments where even Jameis Winston looks unstoppable, but then there's moments where they dip and there's just extreme inconsistency.
Also figure out a running back situation. Thank you.
Yeah.
19th pick in the draft, maybe if one of those running backs goes there. I mean, Dalvin Cook played college football with Jameis Winston, and he's a Florida State guy. And then McCaffrey's getting all this top 10 buzz, but who knows? Maybe a trade up and get Christian McCaffrey, because I think he'd be the perfect weapon.
Everybody wants Christian McCaffrey.
That's amazing. Nate.
Imagine
Let's
that
talk about.
It's awesome.
Let's talk about the Carolina Panthers.
Ooh.
Where do I start? Oh, yeah, the ooh is right. And listen, a couple years ago, we thought this team is on the rise. Cam looked unstoppable. He looked like the video game version of himself. Was doing everything, passing and double digits in touchdowns and rushing.
Dabbing.
So for us, we thought that they were going to continue that, and then there was this extreme dip. So let's focus on the losses and the acquisitions, and we'll kind of talk about what they got to do moving forward. I think the guys that really jump out for the losses, Ted Ginn, I mean, a little bit inconsistent throughout his career, but there was one point a couple years ago where he had 11 touchdowns in the air. He was that speedster that can open up things for different guys. Mike Tolbert, he's a mainstay that was there at the fullback position, but then they picked up receiver Charles Johnson, who's a guy that's been playing in this league for quite some time. Matt Khalil on that line to try to shore things up, and Julius Peppers, veteran presence, a guy that can come in and help right away. Their offense is decent, middle of the pack. Defense, though, 26th. Their defensive passing, 29th. So they're going to need to stop the pass, because when Cam Newton isn't on fire, lighting up things in the air and facing another team that can do that, that defense is going to have to step up and stop somebody. And we know that this draft is full of young talent at the safety position, at the cornerback position. So the question is, where do you go right out the gate? Do you try to go
wide receiver?
Wide receiver? Do you go maybe with Fournette? Do you go with Cook, McCaffrey? Do you go defensively? Do you say, you know what, we're just going to shore up the defense. We have enough talent on offense. You know what, forget that. We got Cam Newton, and when Cam Newton is in the zone, he's unstoppable. So let's shore up the defense around him, because we remember when Josh Norman was there, regardless if you say he was a system guy or not, something left when he left. So you got to find an addition to help them bring that kind of swagger back again.
Absolutely. They did that, I think, with Mike Adams and Captain Munnerlyn, almost like Band-Aids. Those are veteran guys. I told you guys that they call their defensive backfield Thieves Avenue, right? And it was like, that was their thing, and they lost some of that spunk with losing Josh Norman. But I look at this team, and it's all about keeping Cam upright. I think we heard from Ron Rivera saying that his confidence was shook at the owners' meetings. He acknowledged that. And Michael Orr and Mike Remmers, good players 2 years ago, Orr goes down with the injury. Remmers just wasn't going to be the guy protecting Cam Newton. So Khalil comes in. Whether that's an upgrade, I don't like saying upgrade or downgrade anymore on players. I feel like I've learned my lesson on that. I'm not the one to judge.
You're going to get put on a list.
Don't do it. You get put on lists if you do that.
Listen to our podcast.
Listen to our podcast. But I would say they feel better about their offensive line going into this season.
We're going to find out a lot about Cam next year, because he's coming off that tough year. And I've called him football LeBron. I don't know, maybe if he's football Dwight Howard. He had a tough year. We'll see if he bounces back. You know what I'm talking about, Nate. We'll see. He's got a lot to prove.
Two left, Peter. Who we got?
I'm going to take the Falcons, the NFC defending champion Atlanta Falcons. Look, I feel like it's every time we do this, it's almost like we're reading an obituary to a team. We sit here and we slump our shoulders and say, oh, man, but it still hasn't Like, I still can't get that taste out of my mouth. They were up 28-3 in the third quarter. You might have heard about it. It was a horrible loss. To me, the players are almost secondary to the mindset. Like, how do you recover from that? Because if you tell me right now that the Falcons come out, and even without Kyle Shanahan, come out 15-1 and they're chip on their shoulder, I'll say, I believe it, man. I mean, this was a team that was on fire. But if you tell me the Falcons come out, and for whatever reason, they come out of the gates 1-4, 1-5, and they're just like, they're questioning things, and I wouldn't be shocked. Let's look at some of the players that we got here that they lost, right? I mean, Patrick DeMarco, their tough fullback that everyone loved there. Yeah. He's gone. Aldrick Robinson, the burner. Tyson Jackson was released. Paul Warlow goes to Detroit. The thing that I'm shocked about here is usually you have a team that goes to Super Bowl, you lose all these stars. Yeah. There's not a star on that list. They didn't lose any stars.
They lost to Shanahan.
Their offensive coordinator, who a lot of people would say his star burned out when they needed him most. When they needed him most. Hey, when they needed him most, that star burst.
I hear you.
Takes himself off the list, puts himself right back.
You're on the Shanahan's list.
Shanahan.
Lots of lists.
Shanahan! But I
mean, that's glaring, though.
It's a glaring loss, so in comes Sark. To me, that's the biggest thing with the offseason and the culture that they're going to have coming in. We know Dan Quinn's the guy. I've been sitting up here talking, gleaming.
You like Quinn?
I love Dan Quinn.
You in on Quinn?
I'm in on Dan Quinn. I think he's the right guy.
Quinning. Charlie Sheen.
He got the taste out of his mouth. Maybe you need to call Terry Francona and Steve Kerr.
Exactly. We know that he's going to be the most upbeat regular. How are these young men going to respond? Because last year it was all about let's get tougher. We fell on our face after a 5-1 start.
Yes. I love that.
Let's see how these guys respond.
That's the greatest thing that you can say when it comes to the Falcons, because that first game is going to say a lot about their season. First game for the Panthers last year set the tone. We were like, oh boy, these guys don't look like they're going to bounce back from that loss in the Super Bowl. I'm looking forward to watching that first game for the Falcons. It's going to say a lot about their season.
I remember that first game. You guys were at the Giants facility the next day. We were all spread out. What was that about?
Fun.
We were talking about Cam Newton getting hit the whole time.
So much fun.
All right, guys, here we go. New Orleans Saints. Yeah. Should I just do like New Orleans references through the whole thing? Beignets, Harry Connick, above ground graves. No, let's stir up some gumbo in the offseason. Let's bring up the sheet. Let's see what the Saints have done. All right, the biggest, most glaring, Brandon Cooks to the Patriots, which I love because they got a first-round pick for it. And look, you got Drew Brees, you got the turf, you got the dome. Drew Brees has spent most of his career in New Orleans with a 7th-round pick as his best receiver. And I want to take that pick and I want to put it on somebody nasty. We're talking so much about how the Bucs, oh, they're so sexy now, their offense. That used to be the Saints. I don't want them to be sexy anymore. Right. I want them to be nasty and dirty, and I have a vision. I like Manti Te'o coming in. I like Ted Ginn coming in because it's a little flash. But I want Reuben Foster in bad from Alabama. Every time we run his highlight package, this guy, as Daniel Jeremiah puts it, it splatters when he gets to the ball carrier. I love this. This is the guy. I'm picturing Devontae Freeman. I'm picturing Greg Olsen. I'm picturing Jonathan Stewart. Boom on the sideline. New Orleans has not had that in a long time since Jonathan Vilma was really, really bringing it for right reasons and wrong reasons. But that's what I want. I want nastiness, and I want them to get that with that 11th pick in the draft. And beyond that, this is it also. By the way, you cannot go with a franchise quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback, and not make the playoffs 4 years in a row. You can't do it. So this feels to me like Sean Payton. I love you. You're the offensive genius. This is the last ride here. So load up and make those playoffs. We're talking something else.
Oh, he's got a huge contract. Both him and Brees are
4 years in a row?
No, I know.
You know what I mean, Peter? Like, you can't do that in the NFL.
I think they traded that pick for Cooks, and Peyton said something very, very direct. He said, we have to load up on defense. I think they had the 11th pick and the 32nd pick. You mentioned Reuben Foster. You can go cornerback. You can go pass rusher. I would be very surprised, and I've heard a lot of quarterback talk at 11, finding Brees' next defense.
Trade for defense.
Since Jonathan Vilma.
You want Sherman. You would be okay with that. That sort of a trade.
Yeah, from the New Orleans perspective, I would, not from Seattle's. Yeah. I just want to ask Coach more questions about having breakfast with Johnny Manziel. He loves that topic.
Yeah,
so I don't
he was really happy to answer.
Very happy. Coach, come talk to us about it.
He loves that as much as you love this segment.
Nailed it.
All right, NFC South offseason overhaul finished, but not really, because you can head on over to NFL.com/offseason overhaul, and you can check out Chris Westling's piece, which is a complete breakdown, all the ins and outs, the additions and losses of that division.